Right, go. This is the 122nd episode of Paper Tuesdays. Thank you for hitting play. The podcast is growing and growing from many years ago when I started just doing a few Snapchats, sending it out about the Gory Guardian, and now we're sitting down with people, having good chats. Last week's chat with Barry Adamson was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And during the week, I was racking my brains. Marc is in Chicago with Breed and Nora, having a right time. I was trying to think who is going to bring us to another level when we think about what goes on with someone's craft. And I was driving up the M11 and I thought of Stephen Acton. And Stephen is kindly obliged. How are you, Stephen?
I'm great.
Stephen, you're a director.
I am.
How does one get into directing?
How does one get into directing? Let's see. Well, I suppose it would have started for me. Well, I always had an interest in the directing aspect of things, along with design too. Even as a young lad, performing in shows or plays, theatre and stuff like that. But I suppose it would have started when I went to college to study. So it would have been down in UCC. That's when I would have started to dip my toes into directing small bits, and then eventually in Cork City, as well as theatre, I direct musical theatre as well. In Cork City, my first large-scale production would have been a production of Ragtime at the time in the Everyman Palace, and from there on in, you just keep throwing yourself into it, and it just escalates, I suppose, over the years. When I think back to it, I didn't think I'd be doing as many as I am now, but it just turned out that way.
Yeah. The Everyman, what a place to start.
Yeah.
That is a fine venue.
It is a super venue, yeah. Like when I think back to it, I suppose not many of us get the chance to put our first show on in the Everyman or somewhere similar to the Everyman. Yeah.
Yeah. I was down at Jazz there a few years ago, and I think anyone that hasn't been to Cork Jazz Weekend, it's a different experience.
They're missing out big time. I go most years. Yeah, I go most years.
Oh, it's breathtaking.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I was at West Side Story, and I know, look, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. But anyone from the Gory area knows it was fantastic. But what stood out for me was, now I had a vague memory of it from when it was a community school production, but Tony's role and what Tony had to do, for me, I left the theatre a different person.
Right.
I could kind of see there was a way in which he was directed that I was like, there's more to that message than theatre, than just a show, than just a play on a stage. Do you think that your gift as a director can bring that across to an audience? Well,
I like to think it can, absolutely. And I also, most people who would work with me in the theatre area, I hope anyway, and I think they would say that I'm more, not so much just a director, I am a collaborator. And that's the way I would always begin to start a process. And from the very beginning is that we collaborate here. And I suppose rather than directly directing somebody to portray something in a specific way, I like to give them more tools to guide them to almost create it themselves. Because I think an awful lot of time, though, they have an awful lot more to give me even than I have to give them. But when we collaborate together, we can come up with something very special or different. And I suppose with the likes of West Side Story, and you're thinking on Tony and his character, and I suppose the relationships that he would have had amongst, I suppose, friends, enemies, etc., and of course relationships with like girls in the show too. I think for sometimes now you have to go about something from a modern perspective, a modern context. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to set the show in 2023. If it's a very modern story, which it is, and a very, there's no need to have to put hoodies and jeans on them and set it in New York today. So, I suppose to get back to what you're saying, Michael, you always try your very hardest to look at things differently, and is there more to this? Is there more layers to this? And the more layers you pare back, the better. And I think what you just said is, especially not just for us and what we're going to get out of it, but to get across to the audience, and so that they can relate to it rather than just watch a story.
Yeah. Like, obviously, the script helps a lot of that, but like, how Tony's use of the stage in parts of it, like that, he was alone, and yet he knew he had to respond to a call, and that something is coming at the start. You know, there's this. Obviously, that's the narrative of it, but how you portray it. You know, he could have just been placed differently, but I just felt that there was something very deliberate about the way in which he went about his performance.
Yeah. I can see where you're on. I can see what you mean by especially in isolation in areas like that. Yeah. And what interested in what you said is that he knew he had to make a decision and make a call.
Yeah.
And he's a very conflicted character is Tony. Yeah. And people don't always necessarily see that or think that, but he's very conflicted.
It gets messy when he kills your man, but sure, look, that's life.
It does, yeah.
But you also mentioned there, which is very interesting, that you're collaborating, and that's really interesting. Like, it kind of explains then why it was such a popular show with people coming from many distances to try and perform in an audition.
Yeah.
Like, they're looking to work with you, Stephen, obviously.
Well, that's nice to hear, and I hope so. Yeah, and along with my other team members that I work with and collaborate with too.
Megan,
in this particular production, Megan McAvoy and Conor McCarthy. But yeah, they travelled quite a few distances to play part in West Side Story, like as far as Tipperary, Dublin, Hookhead, all these kind of areas. Yeah,
but like, they're going to develop their capacity and to deepen what they can bring as characters, and I suppose the epitome of that was what the two Bernardo and
Riff,
what they did at half time. So
by remaining on stage,
Tell me what, because they brought that idea to you. So tell me how they pitched that to you.
True, they did, and I suppose they know me. I'll run with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Usually the thing that's more obscure, I'll go with. Once it makes sense and has a context and can tell a story, of course. So I was talking to the two guys, maybe leading up to maybe 5 days before the show opens, and I said, okay, we need to just work out technically how we get you off stage at the end of Act 1. But as you just mentioned, because they were both killed at the end and they're on stage, so we were trying to time it so well that when maybe it goes down to full blackout, like on stage, they're dragged off. Do you get me? So we certainly don't want to see them standing up and moving out. It just breaks the illusion. And funny enough, one of them just piped up and said, had you thought about leaving us there? And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, what about leaving us there on stage for the interval? And to anyone that knows, that's a good 20 minutes or more to not just sit down, but to pretend, I suppose, act being dead. So I said, okay, let's try it and think about it, because I knew where it was going and that it would be good. So then we worked on breath control and stuff like that to try and make it as believable as possible. But at the end of the day, Michael, I said to them, they were getting worried. They were like, oh, what? Can you see my breathing? And I said, guys, we know you're not dead. Everything here is an illusion. Everyone knows you're not dead. So relax, breathe, because I need you for the second half. If not, if you stop breathing. But yeah, it was interesting. It was cool. And that worked really well, I thought. Even though the audience were having a break from the tension that was going on, they were maybe having another glass of wine or another bottle of beer and chatting. They're back onto their Snapchat to show them everyone where they are, and onto Instagram to post a story. They were still reminded of what is going on here by looking at the stage.
A huge talking point. This is kind of a wider context of what a question that struck me coming into our conversation was, what does theatre mean in 2023? Because I think initially it was probably a form of live entertainment when there was no television, there was no mass media, and now we have mass media, and yet theatre is still as current. Well, it can be current, and it can be a rich source of entertainment. So what do you think is theatre today?
Yeah, well, today, you're right, it would have been one of the original forms of entertainment back in the day. As I would teach drama and theatre studies, so I do, and you'd have to go into in-depth with Greek classical theatre and all that. Somehow I feel that the stories haven't changed that much from if you go back as far as Medea and all these pieces, right up to modern pieces that Enda Walsh could write, or Marina Carr, these are Irish playwrights of today. The stories haven't changed, and I think people's, I think that what I'm trying to say is the modern theatre as a whole, well, pieces that are being created today, they're still telling modern stories that resonate with a modern audience. And I suppose that's why it's fashionable and why it attracts so many people still today.
Okay.
And there's something very different about seeing something live in front of you, Michael. Especially if they really embody those characters, and we, the illusion is broken. We believe that we're actually witnessing real people, real on that stage. There's nothing like live theatre in front of you. There's nothing like a great movie or a great episode either. So there's not, but there is that screen there. Yeah.
You use that word illusion. It's very interesting, like how it's very much part of what you try to bring to the stage.
Yeah. Well, it is all an illusion. It's something it's saying in theatre that theatre is an illusion. So it is, you try your very best anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And it's suppose when we break that illusion, it gets a bit risky. But then, Michael, there's other styles of theatre that not everybody will be familiar with, and I understand that. So, for example, Bertolt Brecht. Brechtian theatre is a style of theatre, just so it is. He's a theatre practitioner, he was. His style is always to remind the audience they are at a piece of theatre. To hold up, for example, like a placard saying, I'm unhappy now, that kind of thing, rather than saying it. Or rather than having, a 2-story building on the stage that's created to make it look like a hotel, say, as a set, he would have a big sign written on cardboard and an arrow saying, this is a hotel.
Right.
Or they'll stop the piece of theatre every now and again and directly talk to the audience and come back into it. It's just a different style, so it is. And he'd always say that, he'd say the opposite to an awful lot of other practitioners, like that the audience should be laughing when the character's crying and crying when the character's laughing, that kind of thing. Wow. It works for certain pieces of theatre, not only Brechtian theatre and stuff like that, but most of the time we're trying to do the opposite of that.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Wow. Yeah. And Stephen, all this play, this theatre goes on. I mean, the backdrop of you yourself had a massive, serious health scare.
I did.
That wasn't a theatre.
No, it wasn't. I was in a different kind of theatre back then, so I was all right. Yeah, but back in October. Yeah, back in October, I had an accident and ended up in Beaumont for a few weeks with a couple of bleeds on the brain and a fractured skull and other breaks here and there, but thankfully, down to the good work of the doctors and the staff in Beaumont, and then physiotherapists and occupational therapists, and family and friends, not just those in the medical profession. Here I am now, back doing what I love doing.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? It's just it's a great blessing. You probably, I say, you were motivated by the fact of, I'd love to get back.
Absolutely, yeah. I probably got back a bit too early or too sooner than I should have, but I was there and I wasn't. Nothing was stopping me. Yeah. Because for a while it was really my escape, because I wasn't back to work full time, at all. So you're sitting around all day and you wasn't driving. So I couldn't just get into the car and head off somewhere. I am now, thankfully. So just to get out for that 2 hours in the evening or 3 hours with a group of people and start getting back into the craft, just made everything. It was brilliant.
Yeah. And with that craft, like you've mentioned, and the people that are the talent around you, like Connor and Megan and the cast and everything. So like obviously Gory's your home, and it's great to be able to thrive in your craft in your home. But you've a great regional circuit. You've many on the cards at the moment.
I do as of now. I think I can think of 5 shows I have coming up at the moment.
Yeah.
Now they're not all in the next month or two. They're like that's between. So then next I have for Gory. And it is great what you said, to be able to do this in my own town too. Yeah. I haven't been directing in Gory for a lot of years now. I've been in other places. It's just I came back a couple of years ago to direct for them, so I did, and I've loved it. I have a bit of it. They're a great team. And I don't mean just the 2 guys. I mean the whole back team. But I'll be doing another show for Gory now in August. But actually, Gory have gotten the premiere rights to stage the Snapper. Roddy Doyle's the Snapper. So yeah, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm sure the audience are going to lap that one up. So it's a classic, do you know. Yeah, and then
cast is everything there.
Oh, big time, yeah. And I suppose when you're playing iconic role characters, as you would be in lots of pieces, it's twice as challenging. Yeah. You're always going to be compared to them. Yeah. And people who maybe don't go to the theatre that much, because it's not everybody's thing, and I understand that, and that's completely okay. Will be probably some of them will come to this because they love the film, and then they'll forget that this is not actually the film though, and it perhaps can be written differently, because you'll always hear people saying, "I know that's not what he did. He didn't do that. No, she didn't do that. No, where's the van? Where's this? You know, yeah, where's your man at the bar talking about the turkey? You know, all these things." But although I have to say about the script of the play version to the Snapper, it's very similar to the movie. So it is, yeah. And then I have Mel Brooks as the producers in the Opera House in Wexford in November. Yeah, and then I have another few shows after that. I'm going back to Gory then next April with Michael Collins, a musical drama, which is a great show. Yeah. And then I'm up in Trim in Meath, directing Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, which I've already done before. So, and then I will have bits in between that too.
Yeah.
And work.
And work, exactly. But well, I'm getting at with the craft, like you were, like, is this regional circuit is this what you thrive in? Do you need to pause, Shane? Or good? Not at all. No, but. Do you need to, or do you want to thrive in this, or do you, is there another step or another stepping stone that is calling you, or do you prefer the roots? I'm content in what I'm doing for now anyway. Yeah. People always throw out, you know, the silly sayings the whole time. Oh, next stop Broadway, next stop West End. Well, you don't just arrive off a plane in Heathrow and say I'm here, do you know, or anything like that. And not everybody wants that either, do you know. Yeah, I'm quite content and happy within the circuit that I'm working in at the moment. So I am, yeah, definitely, because it's almost like you have to, what is it? What good is it being in Broadway if you don't know the people? You know, there's sort of a connection if there's when you're at home. Exactly, and it's not, I suppose, directing, although it's one of my jobs, it's not my only job. Yeah. So it's not that I'm just constantly looking for more work and everywhere in the theatre industry as such, you know. So no more work, but I think you're constantly looking to refine your craft. Absolutely. Well, you're never. I don't think you'll ever have completed it. Yeah. Never. No, you're always practicing. You're always working. You're always creating. You know, it's at the end of the day, it's an art form. Theatre is still an art form. Directing is an art form. The acting is an art form. There's lots of forms of art. And I always say to my cast, whether it be at the end of a rehearsal process and they're about to go on stage, or maybe a midweek run, or if a run went on for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I'd still remind them every now and again that, yes, this is perhaps exceptional what we've achieved here and what you've achieved, but it's not finished, and it won't be finished on the final performance either, because it's art, and as far as I'm concerned, art is never really finished. Even Michael, could wake up a month after a show, or I could be in the bed at night thinking, and I'd say, damn, why didn't I do that? Or why didn't I think of that now? I can't do it now, it's too late. But that's what I mean. It's never finished. It's evolving the whole time. Yeah. And I think as a team and a group of people working on a project, if we always think like that it's evolving, it will constantly evolve. It won't get stagnant, stale, because it will force them to keep thinking, or okay, we'll try it a different way now, or we'll look at it from a different perspective this night or this day, and at some point it will settle down to what we should be doing. So should you? Yeah. Do you think that's why theatre is going to survive no matter what? Because it is, when you approach that it's always evolving. I think so. So, because we had definitely a rocky patch in the theatre industry, in the world of drama and theatre during COVID. I know everyone suffered. Everyone, every
industry and every art form and every sporting form, they all suffered in a certain way. But I do think, I think theatre was one of the last to really be allowed to come back. You know, when cinemas were opened, we still weren't. When people could attend, like including myself, when I could go to a match, you couldn't go to a theatre where you are in one particular seat for quite a lengthy period of time and you can't move, you know. So there was a lot of thought back then as, will it ever come back? Will it ever come back? Will we kind of afford to come back? But it has, and thankfully the Arts Council and the government did pump plenty of money into the theatre industry to help them get back up onto the road. Yeah.
What do you think of the field?
The field, John B.
Yeah.
What do I say? It's a classic.
It's a classic.
It's a classic. It's funny. Funnily, you should ask me that, because I tend to, or I have done over the years, some quite absurd pieces of drama and theatre, or contemporary pieces, out there pieces. Some people would call them wacky pieces. You know, you wouldn't. Everyone would call them. And so a lot of people would presume I wouldn't be into John B. Keane or anything like that, but I would, because I'll come back to something I said earlier. They're very modern stories. They're very modern stories. And they're still they might be set in a kitchen in the 1950s or 60s, but that doesn't mean the story is past or dated.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of his plays, The Year of the Hiker, people would be familiar with, it's about a man who leaves the family, goes hiking basically, and comes back, I think, 20 years later, that kind of thing. So ultimately, in a modern context, that's a man who leaves the children and his wife and comes back basically then 20 years later because he's not well. So he's basically coming back to die. You know? Like, there's parts of that story is very modern. Yeah. And the field, you should look at that greed and the need of ownership. Yeah.
When you get into those plays, you're really getting into the psyche, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too easy and it's too much of a cop-out to just open the page, do what it says, and say the words. There's more to it than that. You have to, it's the subtext that's most important. It's what's not written is most important.
That's really interesting to use that word subtext, because I never really considered subtext, and then I heard this voice note there a few days ago, and it was about how, I think it was something about what will happen if you master the gift of speech, and it was that by your very speech you bring a whole subtext, and it just dawned on me, like, when we think on the great orators like Daniel O'Connell and how motivators, like even I suppose Hitler and Martin Luther King, that it's what they brought and the energy they brought that infected people.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is when you put it like that.
Yeah. And that's what you're playing at with theatre. Yeah, very interesting. I'm sure I have other. Like what? When you look at film must be or how do you? Tell me where you learn most. Like, on a daily basis, is it a weekly basis? Is it something you read? Is it something you see? Is it a coffee shop? Is it an encounter with a person?
Myself,
as a director. And where I'll bring that onto the stage. Yeah.
I think what you said even mightn't necessarily be about researching film or reading as much. I think the one thing that resonates the most is maybe being in a coffee shop and seeing people. Yeah, it's that, like, researching people, do you know? Yeah, like, and especially if you're doing a piece that has historical context or real life people that you're trying to portray on a stage, you know, you really want to get in depth. You really want to know everything about that person, things that they don't need to know, I think. For example, I would have directed Evita a few years ago, which is about Eva Perón and the president of Argentina and all that. But I just had to find everything about her, things that were not on stage. Like, I had to find out that she had 2 poodles. You know, I had to find out all these kind of things. You know, same, of course, next year going in to direct Michael Collins. Like, there's a lot that we think we already know.
Yeah.
Do you know? Yeah, and it's not just me. It's the team, the people playing the parts. I have to give them the tools to go out. Like, I sometimes do with actors. A very interesting thing is, like, from a window, say for a bus stop, for example, and the other people are waiting at a bus stop.
Yeah.
I make them look at the people through a window so they can't hear what they're saying at the bus stop, and just figure out everything about them. What can you come up with? Things like that, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
It's really interesting. What scenes would you point to as exemplars of breathtaking performance? Or are there any that jump out even?
In film?
Yeah, well, film or like, is there anything that jumps out, like, of someone that you directed or anything like that? The way, what they're able to get across?
I suppose, if I was to think of my own pieces and people I've directed, there's definitely loads of people that come to mind that probably brought exceptional level of performances and stuff like that. I think probably there's one particular actress that I've worked with a lot over the years, an awful lot. She's not from Gorey, so she's not. Her name is Radine Dunn. So she's. We formed a group in Gorey called the Rasper Players back over 10 years ago, and we still work together. And she does tend to direct a bit too, but she acts mainly in my work. You know, not necessarily just locally. It could be in Dublin or it could be touring around the country. She's probably one of the highlights, I would say. I'm not going to single out, say, one particular performance that she did or anything, but in general, over many plays, she's just brought a different level to the game. So I have one particular performance she did play. It's called, she played a character called Naomi in the Living Room, which was, it was a three-hander, but she was definitely the central character, and that'll stand out in my mind for a long time.
Yeah. Doesn't that say it all, that, like, no, you can't point to a video. You just have to point to your memory.
I know,
It's mad, is it? Like, and I suppose that's the gift of it, that it's live, and it's up to you know, if you have an interest in it, then to pursue it and
to be honest, I love film. I do. I really love film. Always have loved film. But people always ask me, "Have I seen this? And have I seen that? Or you need to see this and you need to see that?" And the answer is usually no, I haven't. And yes, I will though. But thanks for the recommendation, because we sit down in the evenings after work or at night time, we'd watch a film or go to the cinema around that time of the day. But that's the time when I'm out working and directing. So I don't get to see enough. I rarely watch TV, you know, unless at the weekend if I'm off and something like that, you know. I watch series and stuff like that,
Yeah. Is there any director that you follow a lot, or like in film or Netflix or anything like that?
Not particularly. No. I'd have utmost respect for all of them.
Yeah.
To be honest, yeah.
Great. Stephen, is there anything that you would like to say, someone who hasn't been to theatre, hasn't dived into it, or maybe hasn't been in a few years?
Yeah.
What would you say to them? Give it a go?
Right. Well, absolutely give it a go. Even if it turns out to be torturous for you. Chances are it won't be any longer than 2 hours. So we can all cope with 2 hours of something that we don't enjoy. I would say is, if you've never been and you're skeptical about, oh, what's that? Or what? That sounds like this or that, you know, hold off maybe until you see something that does take your fancy. For example, I'll come back to what I said. The likes of The Snapper by Roddy Doyle will appeal to an awful lot of people who possibly aren't into theatre or haven't been to the theatre because they're familiar with the film. There's a great example.
Yeah.
Go in and laugh your heart out for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I think that the most important thing is just give it a try. Go for it. You're not going to lose anything.
Yeah.
You won't. Well, hopefully you won't. Yeah. You might lose your mind slightly if you really do. Like, Michael, it's not like I'd go to every piece of theatre either. There's pieces I wouldn't be a fan of either and stuff. So I don't blame people. Like, you know, it's like, I don't blame people who are not into soccer, and I don't blame people who are not into theatre. You don't have to be into everything. Everyone has their own thing that they're really into. But saying that, I'll still go to other things and give it a try.
It is what it is, but like, it's just like, I'm always like, personally, I'm a bit like that. Everything has to be built, or you have to progress and you have to keep moving. But like, when you look at what you do and what theatre does, that like, it's just jump in if you're on board, and if not, we'll see you. You know, like, it's like, it's just great that you're able to find your space, and like, sure, you're going to have a massive shindig now with Ames, and
we are really looking forward to that. That's the award ceremony down in Killarney. The next month there's a big group from Gorey going, about in the excess of 30 anyway. I think it was going down 35, maybe, that kind of thing. But now I'd have lots of other friends, not just from Gorey down there, from around the country that I would direct for as well. You know, so it's really. It's an unreal weekend to like group up together and just meet each other. You know, everyone who's into the one similar thing. You know, and like there will be about 1,400 at that. So but it'll be brilliant. We can't wait. Yeah, I'm especially delighted for Gorey themselves, the society, not just me. I mean them this year, because they've had a big achievement this year with West Side Story, having received 7 nominations.
Stephen, you're bringing a lot to the stage, and you're a very impressive director. Continued success to you and every production that you're involved in, and you get the Paper Tuesdays vote of approval anyway.
Well, thanks, Michael, and thanks for having me on.
That's always
Thank you.